Barnett, hands to Woody, up the middle, touchdown! And Iowa State has won it! Jim Woody took it in, and the Cyclones have upset the nation's second-ranked team!
All right, welcome in for the final regular season preview of the Cyclone Fan Perspective. We go into Farmageddon week. I am joined by a special guest, maybe not so special anymore, thanks to some recap episodes. But if you just tune in for the previews, I'm joined by my brother, fellow Cyclone fan, Justin Schaefer. He's going to be tackling the Farmageddon game with us this week. Big game for the Cyclones. It is the 12th game of the year where they travel to Manhattan Saturday night, 7 o'clock. You can find that game on Fox. Not a great start for the podcast. I'm kind of all over the place. It is Tuesday night when we're recording this. But we have a lot to get to because how nonchalantly I'm starting this. We got to take this game a little more seriously because this is a big one for the Cyclones, I think. Win or lose, they're still going to a bowl game, but I think this game presents a lot of matchups and challenges where I want to see how Iowa State responds to it. So going off of that, let's cover Kansas State first, and then we'll get to Justin and what he thinks of this game and how important he thinks it is for Iowa State moving forward. If you saw Kansas State last, they outlasted Kansas in Lawrence 31-27 to make it 15 straight on the Jayhawks. So Cyclone fans, if you think the University of Iowa has owned us for the past decade, you have no idea, because I would imagine it's got to be tough being a Kansas fan, or a Kansas football fan at least, to say playing Kansas State every year. And if you guys caught eyes on that game, Kansas State shouldn't have won that football game. I've seen Iowa State blow that to Iowa a couple of times, and Kansas did in similar fashion. A drop pick six and a muff punt basically cost Kansas the game, and I think a lot of Cyclone fans that sounds familiar. Trayshawn Ward had an explosive 52-yard run. Jace Brown had a 48-yard pass that was huge for them, but DJ Giddens led the way again for 100 yards rushing in his back-to-back 100 yards for him. Will Howard had a very mediocre 13 of 24 for 165 yards. So they're here. This is a Kansas State team that can outlast mistakes. Going off of that, Justin, what are your thoughts? First and foremost, we'll talk about the game itself, but what's your thoughts on Iowa State's season as a whole, moving into the final game of the year, and what do they have ahead of themselves?
Well, season as a whole has obviously been a success, sitting at 6 wins coming into this game. I mean, not a whole lot of people thought like we'd be in that position coming into this week, but looking back on our schedule, I still think there's a lot to be left desired with this group. It's obviously a young team, but like we've talked about before in our breakdowns, there still hasn't been like a real signature win for us. I know the Oklahoma State and the TCU wins were both big, and finally getting those, we've got 3 road wins in conference play. So you don't want to downgrade that at all, but a lot of those teams have been underachieving this year. And I think just getting a win like this against a team of K-State's caliber, which I know they're not the most flashy team in the world. Like you brought up the whole Iowa.
They never are, but that's how they get you.
You brought up the whole Iowa thing. I mean, K-State low-key's been like the Iowa of our conference last couple of years. They smash in the mouth. They play really disciplined football, and they just keep winning games. And I kind of think this might be the second best team in the conference, honestly, especially at home. They're really tough at home. So if we can go into their house and play well, I know winning is a long shot, but I mean, if we can go in there and play really well and keep it to like a 1-score game towards the end, that'd be huge for this young team.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think you said it well, where I want to kind of see a team where, hey, we're 10, depending on some sports books, 10, 11-point underdogs. I want to see us compete against a team that we're quote unquote not better than, and possibly come out with a win. You said that Oklahoma State and TCU were kind of similar to that, but hindsight's kind of 2020. How bad are we talking about that Oklahoma State team? When they did come to Ames, they just lost to South Alabama, and TCU's not a very good football team. They're fighting for their 6 wins. So Iowa State, we've talked about it before. They take care of the games that they have been so far this season. And now it's finally time to to win a football game you're not supposed to, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
Even though they're they're playing with the cards are in their hand, they're playing with nothing to lose. Do you think this game is still really important for Iowa State?
I do for sure. Because I was thinking about it. Like, when was the last time we had a big conference road win? I was looking at some of our old schedules here. Obviously, last year there were no good conference wins,
That
and this
there was
this year
no
we've had
wins
a
to be
couple
had.
good ones. But I mean, most of them were the home games. The road games are obviously the easier ones.
I,
And honestly, you got to go all the way back to the last time we played at K State, where the
that's what
spread
I was gonna say. Great point.
touchdown, we won a road conference game. It was 2021.
What
I
if I
mean,
told you that, yeah, our last true road win, especially in conference play, was in Manhattan when Brees Hall was still around. I think he had that opening touchdown run for like 70 yards. That was still one of my favorite plays of in Iowa State history. And then also,
I've
what if I told you that the year Iowa State won the Fiesta Bowl and went to the Big 12 championship, we smoked Kansas State. I think it was like 42-6. Will Howard was still playing quarterback for them. So, man, this whole thing has come full circle. You know, they
yeah.
have a lot of familiar faces, but they also have some fresh faces that we'll get into later. Before we get into the kind of the players you want to really pay attention to for Kansas State, I want to talk about a couple of injuries. So let's start with Kansas State first. It sounds like their linebacking core, if they have one spot on their defense that's pretty weak right now, it's really in the middle in particular. They're on like their third or fourth string middle linebacker now. I'm not a sicko. I don't necessarily have the entire depth chart on hand, but to listen to some things on Kansas State, if you want to go and listen to Kansas State things, I would go to Power Cats. It's like their 247 and things like that. John Kurtz is another good guy to listen to for Kansas State stuff. So they're weak in the middle there. Hopefully that can open up some holes for the run game that this team desperately needs. And Will Lee, the third, is their best corner. And I know he got banged up in the Oklahoma State game about a month ago, but he was playing pretty much up until last week. He didn't record any stats, so I'm not necessarily sure what the status is on him. I couldn't really find anything, but that's noteworthy if he's going to be out as well. I think that's a good opportunity for Jaden Higgins. On the Iowa State side, it doesn't sound great for Malik Verdone. I don't think this comes to a surprise. Ben Nickel will probably be the starter. Good thing about Ben, you know, he's played probably, what is it now, he's definitely played in every game, I think. But
Yeah.
I think he started 2-3 games. So this isn't his first go around, unlike Patton and Thompson a couple of weeks ago for Cooper. So a little bit of a familiar face, but do you think, even though Nichols seen the field a little bit, do you think that's still a huge injury for this Iowa State defense going into Saturday?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you could just see like the way whenever Verdone's gone, like a lot of the defenses we've been playing have just been attacking that side of the field every time and going right to where, I mean, he's not. And so I would assume K State will be doing a lot of the same because obviously we're going to be concerned about their rush game and we're really going to be keen on that. So I'm a little bit concerned with where the play action and where some of those passes that with our linebackers having to play up a little bit, trying to be concerned about the run, I am a little concerned with how the secondary could be.
Well, you mentioned the play action. I mean, that's what Kansas State does. They run a similar power formation to Iowa. And when they're running the ball really well, how many play action plays does it really take to open up the secondary to let them loose? We'll talk about the receivers in the tight end position. That's important for them. But I agree. I mean, if we let Giddens or Ward get to 100 yards, and which is very possible, it could be a long day for Nickel, Cooper, Tampa, and Purchase because they're going to be so keyed in on the run. All it really takes is
Which is for, I
one.
mean, for good reason. We need to be keyed in on the run.
No,
But
absolutely. But I'm just saying just takes kind of one time of sleeping at the wheel, and you can get beat deep on a big play. So
mhm.
going off of that, we got to cover it for those who you may have not paid attention to this football team. You know, I like to cover the guys you want to look out for in purple and silver. It starts with their quarterback, Will Howard. Like I said, this is not his first go around. He's been here for like 9 years. I also found out that he has a COVID year, so he could actually come back next year. I
He's not.
believe that you have him, you have Cam Rising, Jalen Daniels has now felt like he's in his 5th year. Like there is going to be guys next year in the Big 12 that have been around way too damn long in college football, and for good reason. It's nice to have a veteran quarterback, especially for Chris Kleiman and his offense. Howard has over 2,300 yards this year. He's got a 145 QBR. He's kind of been up and down, but he's only got 9 interceptions on 23 touchdowns this season. So for the most part, he's been rock solid. There's another guy that's kind of looking over his shoulder. We'll talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about the running backs, though, because these are the two most important guys for that Wildcat offense, DJ Giddens and Trayshawn Wards. Giddens is a veteran power back, man. He is solid. He's not very fast, but he was averaging at 1.5 or 6 yards a carry on Kansas last week. They just couldn't stop him. He's got back-to-back 100-yard games. He's got over 900 yards this season. He is just rock solid. He's not going to blow you away with your speed, but he's tough to tackle. And then when they need speed, they're going to put Trayshawn Ward on the field. He's a Florida State transfer. He's the explosive back. He had only 7 carries last week, but he had like 65 yards. So that's averaging about 7 yards a carry. It's a little skewed because he had a huge run, but that's what he's capable of. That's what he's brought in to do, right? You give him the ball 5 or 6 times, he's probably going to bust one big if you're not paying attention. Let's talk about the receivers, a very, very weak group. I go, jot me down on the record. I think this is I don't think this cuts the top 10 for receiving cores in the Big 12, if I'm going to be completely honest. Jace Brown is a true freshman for them. He's kind of come into as the deep threat guy. He's kind of competing with the Lockett brothers, is statistically really good as a freshman in Kansas State. Keegan Johnson's just a name that you might be familiar with as Iowa State fans. He's an Iowa transfer. He's not going to do much for you, and he's been playing hurt all year, so he hasn't been playing much. Phillip Brooks is the most explosive receiver in that room. He's more of a slot guy. He's not an over-the-top kind of guy. He's not a huge receiver. He's just really fast. He's got almost 600 yards on the year, and he leads the team in receiving. So if you got to pay attention to one guy, that's the guy you want to look for. But I think he was even the guy. No, I don't think he was the guy last year that had the Anthony Johnson turnover when he broke it loose for like 70 yards, and Johnson came out of nowhere. But
I'm not sure who it was.
He has those type of plays where he can break one loose if we don't keep an eye on him. But I think the corners are going to be fine with that matchup. The one matchup I'm concerned about, I worry about tight ends on our defense. And Ben Sinnott is a guy who's, if JT Sanders wasn't in the conference, he would easily be the best tight end in the Big 12. I talked about JT Sanders. I think he's a top 5 tight end in college football, but Sinnott is really, really good too. He's the best receiver on the team. He's got 5 touchdowns this year. He's got over 500 yards as well. Former walk-on. He was going to follow Kleiman to North Dakota State, and he ended up obviously walking on to Kansas State when Kleiman took the job. Little fun fact for everybody. He is a Waterloo Columbus guy. So him and Kleiman are both from Waterloo Columbus. Little Iowa tie for your Farmageddon trivia. Lastly, the defense. Kobe Savage, VJ Payne, Marquise Single. These are really, really good safeties. All 3 of these guys are top 5 in tackles for their defense. They're very, very relied on, especially when I talked about Will Lee being out at the corner position. As I'll relate it to Cyclone fans, this is very similar to their style with Cooper, Verdone, and Freiler. So keep an eye out for those guys with linebacking issues, cornerback injuries. Those safeties are going to be relied on heavily. I just ran through about 100 of them. So if you caught one of them that catches your eye for Saturday, I think I did my job. I think I know where you're going with this, Justin, but which player do you think gives Iowa State the biggest matchup problem, or do you think could have the breakout game for Iowa State on Saturday? Probably on the defensive side of things.
Someone for us, you're saying?
For Kansas State.
Oh, for Kansas State. I mean, obviously, like we said before, touching on slowing down the run, I'm sure they're going to be focused on getting DJ Giddens going right away. I mean, that's just the kind of style of football they want to play, establishing the run early and then moving on to the play action. Like I said before, if we can't slow down their run game at all, we're going to be in for a long day, I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's what I'm really interested to see. While Verdone is out, do you think they just stick? Because we've seen it with Kansas, right? Where Cooper was out and Leipold went at Cooper's position right away. I think it was Thompson who played in that Kansas game. Kind of similar. Sataki went after Patton in the BYU game. So I wonder if Kleiman decides to go after nickel, or does he just we're going to establish the run early and we're not really worried about that matchup yet.
I just don't think they're going to need to try to attack our weakness there. Like, I think that I think they believe their strength will be able to overwhelm our strength, which is our
Yep.
run. Our run defense hasn't necessarily been our strength, but it's
Right.
something that Heathcock's defense is always known for. But I don't really think it's something they're going to be afraid of, especially at home in a night game in this scene. They're probably going to try to establish a run on us right away. And like you said, I think our corners are going to be just fine handling their receivers. So they need to get Sinnott open, and the way they're going to do that is open up the middle of the field by starting with that run.
Yeah, I think if anybody, if there's any concern in the receiving or tight end right for Kansas State against Iowa State, it's definitely Sinnott, and it's like you said, the play action stuff that could really get him open. But you mentioned the rush defense. That's the matchup I'm really looking forward to. I'll give another one in a second, and it's obviously a lot of based around Iowa State's defense versus Kansas State's offense. Iowa State's rush defense ranks 34th in the country. They only give up 124 yards per game. They give up about 3.7 yards per carry. So how does that match up with Kansas State's rush offense? So kind of strength on strength. And I'm really interested to see how that pans out. That's a question I have in mind, which leads me to my next thing is a couple of questions that I have going into this game that I want to see. Will we see Avery Johnson? For those who haven't been deep diving into Kansas State, he is a former 4-star true freshman. He turned down offers from Washington and Oregon to go to Kansas State. He's from Mays, Kansas, so he's a hometown-ish kid. He started the Texas Tech game where he had 5 total touchdowns. And I think I went on the record in one of my recaps saying that he's the real deal. We'll see him around for a really long time. I think that's true. And I thought it was based on Will Howard having injuries. But from what I've been listening to on Tim Fitzgerald stuff for Power Cats is that was not the case. It was more so like to light a fire under Will Howard's ass, basically. And it did. I mean, he's played well his last 3 starts against Baylor, against Kansas, and against Texas. But I thought that was interesting. And the fans seem like they're kind of frustrated with how they're not using him. Apparently, he's a pretty good thrower, and they just try to just use him on his legs. So big question, will we see him? I'm guessing maybe in some run packages they'll try to, but that's about all I see. I think he could present a problem for Iowa State. I don't know. Have you watched him at all this season?
I definitely watched the Texas Tech game earlier in the year when he had the 5 rushing touchdowns. That kind of spooked me a little bit. But like you said, they've moved away from him, which I haven't paid a close enough attention to see why. I mean, I'm not a fan of 2 QB systems. I just don't really think that's in the best interest of a team.
Mm-hmm.
You usually want to go one way or the other. I don't think we'll see him, especially in the first half. If they come out and got some plays dialed up for him in the first half, I'm worried that we're not going to be ready for that. The only way I think we really see him is if we can jump out to an early lead, or we're really just shutting them down and they're going to have to get crafty with it.
That's what I have down. That's another question I have. If Howard struggles, say somehow, would shock the shit out of me. If Iowa State gets up 14-0 in the first quarter or the second quarter, they're making mistakes. They can't throw the ball in our secondary, even with Verdone out. Do they go to him right away? That's like the biggest question I have, because from what I've been hearing, they're pretty stuck on Howard at least the rest of the way. Now, it was super interesting because Howard has the ability to use his COVID year. But I mean, they're going to want Johnson around next year. Like, he is their guy. He's an NFL type guy. So do they show Howard the door and tell him to transfer somewhere? I'm getting in a rabbit hole, but that is just the biggest question I have. The reason being, he's such an elite playmaker. I'm interested to see if he's going to take the field. Last question I have is Iowa State's defense against Kansas State's offense in the red zone. I talked about the rush defense and the rush offense matchup, but Iowa State ranks 12th in red zone defense. Kansas State ranks 21st in red zone offense. When they cross that red line, they are solid. If Iowa State can force at least one turnover or maybe a turnover on down because they're having kicking issues, I think that's a win for Iowa State. That is going to turn the tide in these low possession games. That's a huge matchup I'm willing to see and wanting to see how that shapes out. Now, let's go into the actual game itself. Justin, you're going to take us away with 2 keys to the game that you think Iowa State needs to take advantage of to win. What do you got for us?
Yeah, we haven't really touched on how our offense is gonna, really work against their defense. But the first and most important key for me is, can we go the whole game without turning the ball over, even if it's just one pick? I know as a freshman quarterback going in this spot, that's a tall ask for Rocco Beck. But I looked at the stats today, and do you know what our record is when he does not throw a pick?
I don't think we've lost yet this year.
Yeah, no,
I mean, on the top of my
5-0.
head.
We're 5-0 when he doesn't throw a pick,
Well,
and whether he's only
we
got one Rocco.
no, we talked about it last week on the recap. I mean,
Yeah,
his picks come at the worst times. He's been
yeah.
really good. I don't want to take that away from him, but his picks come at the worst times.
And even if it's just one pick and one play, we don't necessarily have that margin for error to overcome that. So we're
100%.
5-0 when he doesn't throw a pick, and when he does throw a pick, we're 1-6. So, and I think
I
it's
think
about
you just
time.
laid it out for us there.
Yeah. So pretty obvious there. It will go a long way if we can go the whole game without turning the ball over.
Here's a little counter to your stat that I'm not proud of. Kansas State ranks back-to-back seasons in the top 25 in takeaways. And it's going to be cold in Manhattan, which means it's going to be tougher to throw the ball. I agree with you 100%. If he can stay clean without an interception, I love our chances. But what's our second one if we're going to win this game?
Yeah, and it's not the exact same, but it applies to our defense. Can we apply pressure on Howard? Like we said, they like to run the ball and pound it, and they're not there to like fly it around. Like if you look at Howard's stats, he doesn't have too many games above like 200 yards passing. They're really just trying to take care of the ball, and our pass rush has like I'm out. We lost Will McDonald to the draft this year, so you can't like judge him that hard, but it's clearly taken a step back from what we've had in the
Yep.
past. And especially if we don't have Verdone, we can't have our secondary guys just out there on an island the whole game. We got to be able to generate pressure, especially from our linebackers. I think this could be a really big game for our linebackers, dialing up that 3-4, trying to get some pressure and handling the run. They're a young group too, but it's going to be asking a lot of those guys.
I would love to know our stats on pressure rate, sack rate, whatever it may be from first to second half, because the first half last week was pretty solid, and I think that's kind of been the story all year. Because I've said it before, we don't have depth on the offensive or the defensive line. I thought Joey Peterson played awesome again. I think he had 2 sacks in the first half. Tyler Onyedem looked like another NFL caliber type guy for this defensive line. Um, I've been really disappointed with Dominic Orange. He, for as big as a guy he is, and we talked about that was his strength, was his size. I just don't see a ton of pressure from him. And J.R. Singleton has been fine. I think he's a good leader for the locker room, but the group is solid in the first half. And then there's just not much after that. And it's really hard to go to. I mean, we've gone to Ike Ziagu. There's another guy on the top of my head that I'm missing, but um, I think I wouldn't get overly excited if we're getting a ton of pressure in the first half. I want to see how we respond in the second half, but I agree. I think that's a great point because I think Will Howard's he's not a super mobile guy. So
No, he's not. He's not a world beater by any means. So we definitely can't let him be comfortable at home. That's just a
yep,
recipe for disaster.
yeah, absolutely. I'll go into mine. The last one, kind of piggybacking off of your interceptions, but mine's margins slash special teams in particular. Um, I think Iowa State's done a pretty good job this year with special teams, hiring the special teams analyst, bringing in Chase Contreras. I think Tyler Perkins has been really good on the punt team. And when I think of this game, at least in the close matchups that we've seen over the years, I remember back in, what was it, 2009 when we played back in Arrowhead, the game came down to a block extra point.
Oh my
I
God.
mean, how many times, what was it last year? I think we went 3 of 4 in field goals and we lost 9-10. I'm not just signaling out the kicking game, but the special teams is so important in this game.
Yeah.
Youngblood takes off a kick return back in Manhattan when we were down there in 2019, Justin. Like, how many times does this game come down to special teams?
Yeah.
Last Kansas, you can't muff a punt on this team. That's a marginal error that you can't cost. And here's a little stat for you. Kansas State hasn't returned a kickoff for a touchdown all season. I think that's the first time in over like 15 years, if it continues.
Don't
On
even speak that into existence.
Oh my God, I was like, do I need to knock on wood now?
Yes.
That is huge. Keep that
That
stat
that
true.
kick that kickoff return they had to start the game in 2019 was the biggest kick in the nuts I have ever experienced. That was horrible. It was
That's
like
what they do. You listen to guys. Go listen to. I'm. uh, I don't know. I'm promoting other podcasts. It's bad podcasting, but I think consume all the knowledge you can. Listen to Cyclone Fanatics kicking it. Tim Fitzgerald comes on there, and Graham Mahoney asks him the question, "What about the special teams?" The guy loses it. He's like, "I've been meaning to talk special teams with Kansas State all year. Nobody asked me." Like they love this shit. They love kickoffs. They love punts. Special teams is their thing. If we can win somehow the special teams battle, not only just making kicks, but like not turning the ball over on returns. And Jalen Knoll, you've been solid in the return game. Have another big return this Saturday. I think that's going to be a bigger factor than any sort of little factor outside of maybe an interception from you, which I thought was a great point. Let's do it. Prediction time. Iowa State is I think a 10-point underdog right now. I have to go double check. DraftKings is my book of choice, but the backs are against the wall, at least for matchup wise in this game. Justin, you give me your prediction first.
It's I look at this game as, I mean, it's been a long time coming. It's like a culmination from our whole Big 12 season, starting on the road with that Oklahoma team. I obviously they're built way different, but I think the skill level is kind of similar with this K-State team to the Oklahoma team, and I'm really excited to just see how we've grown along the season as we keep harping on how young we are, and this could be a big test for us. But with the growth that I've seen us like week by week, I think they are ready to take the next step. Like I'm not going to say they're going to go in there and win by any means, but I do think they are going to keep it close. I think they're going to cover that spread, whatever it is. I do, at least I hope. I think it's going to be a one-score game there coming down to the end.
Give me an actual score
Oh,
here. What do you
you need
think?
an actual score.
Yep, I need a score.
I would probably say 27-24 Kansas
K-State?
State. Yeah.
Okay. For those who care, that would hit the over. When I look at this game, when I think about November, Iowa State fell at home twice at night. Their one game on the road at night, they absolutely demolished it. Now, talent-wise, BYU compared to Kansas and Texas isn't even close. I understand that. But Campbell said on the coach's show, I think I was listening last week, how much they really enjoy road games, especially at night. He talks about the vibes. They spend all day together. They have a good team meal. You're smiling, you're laughing, but this is a true story. He said it
No,
on.
I was just thinking back to how we lost by 30 at night at Oklahoma.
It's a great point, but I think obviously this team is much better since then. They have definitely figured things out.
Yeah.
So that being said, I kind of love the road chance for Iowa State here. I'm all knock on wood, it'll probably end up making me look stupid. I like the fact that they're going on the road this week rather than hosting Kansas State for a big game. Let me pull up the weather again. I think it's important. When the last time I checked, it was like really cold. Yeah, so Saturday night there's a chance of snow in Manhattan. So the weather's not on our side. We've seen this story before, but I think this team bounces back. I worry that they're a little banged up from that Texas game just because it took so much out of them. But I think Kansas took a lot out of Kansas State too. It took a lot for them to go on the road and win that football game. That being said, I would love for John Haycock to just send it all out there, give Howard everything you got, play like nothing to lose again because you really don't. I think Iowa State could get off to a quick start and kind of being a young team that they are, kind of stumble at the end of the game. I'm going to say Iowa State falls again. I like your prediction, Justin. I'm going to go 24-14 Iowa State falls. I just think the offense is going to struggle on the road. We'll see how the run game goes. We failed to even mention that. Cartavius Norton, Eli Sanders, are you going to have a big day?
I know Sanders and Norton are pretty young too, but I think last week was the first week that Abu led us in carries. I wouldn't hate to see that again.
Yep. I mean, Get the freshman going. Like I said, you got nothing to lose. Get him a ton of experience going into that bowl game. Big 12 games to highlight before we send everybody out of here. Houston travels on the road to UCF. UCF is trying to become bowl eligible in the first year in the Big 12. BYU is striving for 6 wins. They have to go to Stillwater. Oklahoma State takes care of business like they should, being the 17-point favorites. They will punch their ticket to Dallas. Kansas travels on the road to Cincinnati. Barf. West Virginia travels on the road to Baylor. Barf. Those are 2 blowouts. And Iowa State travels to Manhattan for the 106th Farmageddon rivalry. That's easily the best game of the weekend. So I'm pretty excited for Iowa State to once again be on national television. Justin, we went 30 minutes, but I think it's pretty appropriate with this game. And honestly, one of the more underrated rivalries in college football. I'm super excited for the opportunity Saturday. Anything else you have before we close out?
No, not really. I mean, after you started touching on the weather there, I kind of instantly regretted me picking that many points. Does anyone know how windy it's going to be? They just
it's probably
nightmare flashbacks back to 2019 with how windy that game was too. Watching Brock try to throw it in the cold kind of scares me.
Wind's gonna be lower. It's gonna be lower, it says. So
okay, good. Well, yeah, just excited to see how the team finishes the season off. I know it's young, and I do like your point about how the team can kind of come together on the road. There's a lot of nerves playing at home, kind of being in front of a young crowd. There really is nothing to lose, and I'm excited to see how this team comes out.
Absolutely. We will be back again, probably Sunday or Monday. We still have to wait a week and see after the Big 12 title game what the bowl matchup will be for Iowa State, but we'll definitely have a way better idea after Saturday. Super excited. Can't wait to see it. Great weekend of college football. Make sure that you tune in to the Play the Fight Song podcast on Apple or Spotify. Week 12 is here. It is rivalry week. Michigan, Ohio State, the Iron Bowl, the Apple Cup. There are so many games to watch, and the Farmageddon obviously is the one you have to tune into the most. 27-17, Kansas State is Justin's prediction. 24-14 is my prediction. Kansas State winning that one as well. We hope we're both wrong. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you soon. And once again, everybody knows what it is. Go Cyclones.